Alrighty, so welcome to the NTS podcast, episode 3 with the legendary Bryan Boorstein. What's up, man?
Hey, dude. Thanks for having me. Thanks for calling me legendary. That's pretty cool too. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. It should be a good conversation today.
Yeah, awesome, man. You know, when you've been in the fitness industry for a while, listen to a bunch of podcasts and stuff, like you just figure out different people, and you're definitely one of the people I kind of look up to a bit, and you're up there with a lot of the people I kind of take info from, and it's just a pleasure to have you on, and it's really cool.
For sure, man. Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, so how's your day been? How's life? What's the recent events in Brian's life?
Yeah, so I just got off the erg rower, not to be confused with hypertrophy rows. So I'm doing I have a coach now for erg rowing in the quote off season from my biking. With lifting of course being the backbone of everything. Still sort of chasing hypertrophy, I guess, at 41 years old. But day's been good. Dropped the kids off at school. What got a walk in, got that circadian rhythm started with that sunlight and that movement directly in the morning. Ate some chicken, rice, and broccoli, and did a little work, and then did my row. And now I get to talk to you. So great day so far.
Awesome. Awesome stuff, man. Yeah, like I said, I just had COVID, I'm assuming. I'm just feeling better. I feel great. Like, even though I'm not 100% better, I just feel like compared to how it was, I'm just feeling awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm just happy.
Yeah, like we were talking about off air, it's the appreciation and the gratefulness that you feel after being sick. It really is a game changer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, man. When I think of you, I just think of, I don't know, man. I guess a lot of people correlate you, but like with N1 and stuff, because you've been through their courses and things like that, as well as has Morgan, the guy who was on the first episode. So I don't want to turn it into like an N1 podcast in total, like just N1 stuff. But I thought we could talk a little bit about your training career, like how it's changed over time. I assume it changed a lot after like applying things from N1 and different places. And like, how did you kind of start out with lifting? And was it totally like just Monday,
Mhm.
bro style? And how did it kind of develop over time?
Yeah, what's funny is I actually got to the bro split training about 3 or 4 years into what I would call probably more productive base training. So in 1997, I was 15 years old, and I just started working out in ninth grade here in the US. I don't know if you guys use the same grade system, but I was 15 and I had not hit puberty. That was the main impetus for why I was training, was because all the other guys had hit puberty or beginning to, and I still was appearing like a little boy. But I had aspirations to play basketball competitively. In fact, I had the skills to make varsity, but I didn't have the size or the manliness, I guess. And so I started lifting to try to improve that. And not much really happened in the first year because I was just like, I had no testosterone. I was still a little boy. But one thing that was positive from that time is I got obsessed with it so much that I went onto the internet forums. Back in the day, this would be like the equivalent of someone's Instagram page, but it's basically forums where people talk about training, and there's a couple guys that would be the proctors or like the head of the group, and they're the big badass guys that have walked the walk and all that stuff. And so I stumbled into this one group in the late 90s, and the big guy in the group was Paul Carter, who's
Mm-hmm.
Lift Run Bang on Instagram. And so back, like, 16-year-old Bryan was engaging with 26-year-old Paul or whatever he was at the time. And Paul basically told me to just train the six main movers 2 to 3 times a week, full body. So you had like a squat, a hip hinge, a horizontal pull, a vertical pull, a horizontal push, and a vertical push, and then add a dip. So there were 7 movements. And the goal was just split those up in 2 different sessions, and who have one session Monday, one Wednesday, one Friday, repeat basically 3 times a week until you get really big and strong. And I thought that was really good advice. And so that's more or less what I did for the first 2 or 3 years of training. And then I went to college, and that's kind of when I stumbled into more of the bro split thing. It was a lot harder to have fun and party and do things like that when you're having to hit full body sessions 3 times a week.
Yeah.
They're just daunting. I mean, they crush you. And doing a chest Monday, back Tuesday, legs Wednesday, shoulders Thursday, arms Friday type thing, it just fit. And we would always go out and drink on Thursday nights. And so Friday was arm day because you could go in sandals and you didn't have to think about it. And you just do your preacher curls and like feel good about yourself. And so that's what I did for all through college. And then even for a couple of years post college. And then at that point in 2009, I found CrossFit, ended up starting a CrossFit gym, did CrossFit competitively for a while, sold my CrossFit gym in 2017, 16, actually 16, started training online in 2017. And that's kind of when I stumbled into this evidence-based hypertrophy space. And at the time it was, I mean, it still is way different than what there wasn't really even an evidence-based hypertrophy space back in the early 2000s when I started, and now there was. And so there was all of this material to consume, and there was frequency, and there was volume, and there was intensity, and how these three variables work together. And it was awesome. Like, it felt like I was a rookie again after 18 years of training. It was crazy. And so I digested as much of that as I could. And then in 2019, I stumbled across all the N1 stuff and realized Kasim was here locally in Boulder, Colorado. And so I contacted Cody to get to Cass. And eventually those guys kind of welcomed me in, and I learned a lot from them. And I implement a lot of what they teach, and I'm a huge fan of everything that they do. But I wouldn't say that my training is 100% N1. There's a lot of things that I do that I take from my roots, from my full body sessions, from my bro split days, from things that I've found productive over the years that may not be biomechanically perfect, but they're things that I feel work for me. And I would also say that I coach clients in a similar manner, where it's, yes, we use a lot of N1 principles, but we're definitely not like an N1 specific program.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people maybe utilize a lot of their biomechanic stuff and exercise selection and things, but not always their programming style, maybe their metabolic training and stuff like that. So there are many ways to do it. But like
For sure.
like I always say, just taking good stuff from different people and just debunking this, or not using the stuff that you kind of don't want to use, and just figuring out your style, I guess.
Yeah,
were you on the
absolutely.
bodybuilding MISC forums back in the day too?
No, you know what? I didn't actually do the bodybuilding.com forums. This
Hmm.
forum was called Power and Bulk,
Yeah.
and Power and Bulk 2000 or something like that. And so I was big on that one. And then I was also big into one called Hard Gainer, which at the time I think is a little different than, I don't know if you know anything about Hard Gainer now, but there's a stigma around Hard Gainer that they basically just tell you to do like one set or two sets twice a week, and that's like enough volume. So you're basically doing like 3 to 4 sets a week total work sets.
Hmm.
And that wasn't the way that it was back then. When back then it was more of this 2 to 3 times a week full body training with the big lifts, the big compounds, kind of like what Paul Carter had suggested to me. And so I spent a lot of time on Hard Gainer as well. And then Cyber Pump was another kind of knockoff of that had a bunch of good information on high intensity training, lower volume type stuff.
Yeah, I feel like a child now because the bodybuilding misc is like past, like after that, or maybe
Yeah,
around the
yeah,
same
yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a number of different ways you could get information, like there was a lot of good places. Alberto Nunez and Helms and
Hmm.
Lane Norton and all them were on the bodybuilding.com forums. So there was people doing it back then as well.
Yeah, and back then it was a lot of just guessing and just figuring out shit yourself. But now it's like there's always coming new data all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Length and work, everyone's on that right now. Like there's so like it's developing faster and faster, and it's like shit. I think I know a decent amount of stuff, but like there's so much I don't know, and there's so much to learn.
It
I was
was, sorry,
sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I took Meadow Henselman's PT course, and he's all about the full body training, and then discovered some other stuff, and then N1, and then it's like, wow, there's so many different approaches to this thing.
Yeah. What did you think of the Menno Henselman's course? Did you implement the full body high frequency thing, or what did you think of that?
My first coach had me on full body, and I have used it a lot. Just mainly when I want to train like 3 times a week, I don't have time for more sessions, and I do full body. And I think it works great. You just have to be careful with managing fatigue and just not
Mhm.
having sessions crash into each other too much. And I think Mano even programs like 6 times a week full body, right?
6 or 7. Yeah. I don't think he
Mhm.
takes rest days. Have you ever tried it in that fashion?
Like six. Yeah, I've tried like 6 times a week full body before, and it's worked well. To be fair,
Okay.
but I think my problem for a lot of my training career was to just I wanted to do more volume than I could recover from because I feel like I can't do that much volume, so I'd rather do high intensity and less sets, maybe like 8, 10, 12 max sets per week, and that's
Yeah.
seems to flow nicely right now. Because if I do 15, 20, I mean, it's dependent on the exercise where it's biased and stuff like that. But like when I push up the volume, I just feel like I can't progress. I just stagnate. So,
Yeah, I've found the same as well. I think part of it might be because I don't have a good I don't hold reps in reserve very well. Like I don't enjoy training with a lot of reps in reserve. And
mhm.
so to do high volume, you have to be okay with a lot of sets that are 3 and 4 RIR on movements that you're probably used to taking to failure. So yeah, I get it, man.
Yeah. Like some people say, like I have a push day heavy and then I have a light push day. And I'm like, a light push day? What's that? Like five, 6, 7 reps in reserve? Or
Or is it just more, yeah, like higher reps, maybe? I don't know, like 12 to 20 in one day that's like 5 to 8.
yeah, I guess it's like more reps and more reps in reserve and just
Yeah.
not crushing yourself so much. But
Right.
yeah, what I've also found to be fair is like before discovering N1 and a lot of other things is I was like, when you're doing barbell squats and your quads aren't growing and it's like maybe it's because I'm bending over and it's like RDL almost.
Yeah, like a good morning sort of. Yeah. Well, it's like there is a purpose for like a low bar hip dominant squat, right? If
hmm
if you're trying to train your glutes as the primary mover, that's probably a pretty good way of doing it. And if you want to train your quads, you probably should do the opposite and let your knees go forward, right? So it's not that one is better than the other. It's about knowing the context of where one would be programmed for what purpose. And yeah, I think N1 has brought a lot of light to that discussion, which is great for the industry.
Yeah, like there's always a purpose for each exercise, and if you don't know what it's doing, then like, why is it in there? That's kind of
Yeah.
how I think about it. Like that's what they're saying, I think as well. Like if you
Yep.
have a squat, is it for your quads or is it for your glutes? And like every exercise has a purpose and is there for a reason. Yeah.
Yep. Ways that
So
you can kind of manage fatigue.
yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about your cardio stuff, but I think we can talk a little bit about what we're already into right now. Because when I have I've used apps for clients. I don't want to turn it into like a business podcast talking about the intricacies of coaching because this is mostly about fitness. But I've used a lot of your videos because I know you always have stellar form and you're always executing things really greatly, and it's just looks like a freaking dance when you're performing your leg extensions, whatever exercise it might be. But I noticed you implemented a lot of like uh, partial work, like pauses in the shortened position, pauses in the lengthened
Lengthened.
positions,
Yeah.
even with leg extensions in the lengthened, in the shortened, with hamstring curls in the shortened and lengthened, I think, and a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of go about like, I mean, it's a complex question, but like, what do you feel like makes you pick different tools like that? For example, if you
Yeah.
have
You
leg
know,
extension,
if
is it dependent on the program as a whole and like your current goal or?
Yeah, I mean, it's always dependent on the program and what else is in that day of training and what else is in the full week of training.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I've really latched onto in the last few years is using short overload movements before lengthened overload movements.
Mm-hmm.
And I like this for a number of reasons. I like that the short movement really warms up the joint around let's say we're talking about knee flexion. So your short overload movement is a leg extension and your lengthened movement is a squat pattern, a hack squat, something like that. I really feel that the leg extension will warm up the joint around the knee and provide a bunch of blood flow there that makes it feel better when you squat the hack squat.
Mm-hmm.
And you won't need as much weight for the hack squat. And given everything that we know now that basically the muscle only knows tension, uh, I don't think that we need to sit there and be like, oh, well, you're going to get more total volume load if you were to do the hack squat first because you can lift more weight that way, or whatever kind of argument you want to make. I feel like research recently has pretty much debunked that as even anything that we need to worry about at all. The muscle knows tension and it knows how close it is to failure, how much you're holding the muscle to the fire. And so using short overload movements, especially with a pause in the short position as the first movement there, makes a lot of sense. And then being able to take advantage of the stretch mediated hypertrophy from the lengthened dominant movement that came next also makes a lot of sense. And I just try to follow that same structure through the exercise ordering across each given day and also across each given session throughout the week. And it's been great for me because at 41, my body is in better shape, like my joints, and nothing hurts. Like I literally feel better than I did when I was 30 competing in CrossFit. So for me, at least as an N of one, that works extremely well for me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are skeptical of just doing leg extensions before squats, for example, because it means they have to lower the weight. I mean, it's a hit to the ego, I guess. But yeah, in my experience as well, when I've been doing it, like it feels great and it kind of fills all the gaps, you know, shortened overload before lengthened overload. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking of doing that with most of my muscle groups, just trying it out and seeing what happens, you know.
I would say I do it pretty much across every muscle group where I can in most days. Yeah.
It's kind of cool, you know, when you drop the ego and just do what makes sense, even though you can't do as much weight, like it feels great. You get nice progression. It just makes sense, you know?
Yeah. Less fatigue. I mean, if you can do it with more stimulus to your quad and less stimulus to your knee and your hip and like all these other big dominance features on your body, then yeah, you're going to get a lot more stimulus and a lot less fatigue. And that is the ultimate goal of training, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, even though DOMs don't necessarily mean that much and like how I'm into muscle connection, but I feel like if you go to the gym on a quad day and you go out of there and like, I don't even feel my quads at all being worked, then that's maybe a problem.
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely separate out the stimulus that you get into like immediately after, like, how do you feel in the next 15 minutes after you finish your workout? Like, how is it walking up and down stairs, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's, like you said, the DOMs, which are the next day kind of sign or flag of stimulus that you achieved. And so soreness is relevant in the sense that it tells you when it's too soon to train a muscle group again, but it doesn't tell you that you had a great session. For example, the back, if for many people, almost never gets sore. And that doesn't mean that you can just train the back with 6 sets to failure every single day. There's still a recovery consequence that you need to manage, despite the fact that it didn't make you sore.
And it's like quality over quantity always. Like it's amazing when you kind of start doing those things and you just do a few sets and you're like, wow, like I can get better stimulus out of 3-4 sets than I can out of 16 half-ass sets, you know? Yeah. So it's kind of cool.
No, it's kind of wild to think back about the bro split days when I used to do, like you say, 15, 16, 17 sets, upwards to 20 on some muscle groups in a given session. And so it's like, whoa, how many RIR did I have to be able to get to that point? Because I'm actually going to start using a bro split again in my next training cycle in January. I just made this decision and I'm going to go back to doing a legit bro split, but it's going to be with 6 to 9 sets per muscle group. And that's what it's going to take, you know?
Yeah. It's also cool, even with like some personal training clients I've had recently, like you just help them push the reps in reserve, have great form, have good exercise selection, and their progress is just cool to see. Because I think a lot of people struggle with just pushing hard enough in the gym, going in there alone. They don't really know what they're doing. And then in addition, they got to push to like 2 reps in reserve on the leg press. It's like, it's kind of a learning curve to get comfortable with that. I feel like when I take a few months off training and I go back to the leg press or something, it's like, I got to get used to this again because I'm not there right now.
Yeah. I mean, the lower body movements, the compound lower body movements are just an entire different beast in themselves as far as learning to work to failure. I feel like it's like everyone understands what it feels like to fail a pull-up. Like I don't know anybody that hasn't started their journey and either you can't do a pull-up at all, but you tried, so then you know failure, or you do 4 and you try to do 5 and you fail the 5th. Like everyone can take a set of pull-ups to failure, but yeah, a leg press, a squat, one of those things to failure, man, very, very tough for somebody in the early stages of training.
Mm-hmm. And something I think I got from your podcast that I didn't really think that much about was that shortened bias movements often fail like incrementally, little by little throughout the rep range, and you can do partials and stuff. And lengthened bias movements often just fail like much more suddenly in the lengthen range or something. So
Yeah,
that's just
much
something
more aggressively. Yeah, you said subtly, but yeah, much more aggressively in the
yeah,
length range.
suddenly.
Yeah, suddenly. Got it. My
Yeah,
bad. My
yeah,
fault.
not subtly at all. But yeah, do you use you utilize quite a bit of like partials with lap pull downs and stuff like that?
Yeah, any movement that's short overloaded, I start using partials really early on in the cycle. So I'll usually have an intro week that's got about 2 RIR on short movements. And then the next week I'll jump to 0 to 1 RIR. And then by week 3, I'm usually into partials for short movements and I'll run partials until the cycle's over, at 6 to 8 weeks or whatever that is. And so yeah, I believe in the lengthened overload research, as you should if you read it. Like 9 out of 10 studies support it, and it seems intuitive to me that in a movement that fails short, there's just so much stimulus to be had that is just left unstimulated.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can literally do a set of cable rows or spider curls or whatever it is, and when you can't get a full range of motion anymore, you can get 12 partials. It's like if you just stop it when you fail full range, you've missed out on the opportunity to stimulate so much more growth
Mm-hmm.
in the range of the motion that has been shown to be more significant as well. So, yeah, it just is crazy to me to watch people take short movements to failure. It's just, and not further. It baffles me at this point.
Yeah, that's kind of what I tell my clients as well. Like failure doesn't feel like failure. It depends on the exercise. Like a failure on leg press and a failure on the lat pull down is like so different. And you just feel like, okay, I hit failure for a lot of the like range of motion, but it's like my muscle is not done. Like I have more to give. So
Yeah,
doing like a
absolutely.
spider curl and then like a incline curl or something like that is like totally different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I do those, you've probably seen the kind of behind the way back face away curls where I'm on an incline bench with the cables. When
Hmm.
I make a rep, I'll get one partial that's 30% of the way up and then it's over. Like there's nothing left after that. So yeah, to your
Hmm.
point, they fail very suddenly. A leg press or a hack squat or a face away curl or something, you make a full rep that you struggle through, and then there is nothing left to give after that. So if you don't have a spotter in a leg press, you get pinned. And that's, I think, the scary thing for a lot of new people, as you kind of brought up.
Yeah. Because I feel like with some lengthen movements, like especially biceps, like incline curls or even incline curls with like support behind the elbow and stuff like that, like the most lengthened part of the movement feels really straining. Like if you just push yourself to failure and go fully lengthened, then it's like I feel like I want to keep a little bit of the range of motion, like stop a little before the fully lengthened because it feels like I'm gonna tear my freaking bicep off. I guess most of the bicep tears happen in lengthened bias movements, like incline curls, like probably like preacher curls, I think.
I think preacher, yeah. So the interesting thing about the preacher curl is that because of the fact that the humerus, the arm, is in front of the body, it's
Mm-hmm.
not actually a long length for the bicep. The
Mm-hmm.
long length for the bicep is when the arm is behind the body. And
Mm-hmm.
you can just feel that, without even having to have weight in your arm. If you reach your arm back behind your body, there's a stretch in your bicep. When you're at a bottom of a preacher curl, you're overloading the lengthened position of that movement, but it's not actually a long muscle length.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you're resting the arm on the pad that provides that leverage. And I think that might be why there's so many tears in there, because it's a mismatch of overload with where the actual length and position is for the bicep. So it's putting a ton of pressure at the bottom of a movement that's meant to be a little bit like positioning wise, that's meant to be a little bit more short overloaded. So I don't know. I get kind of freaked out by preacher curls too, and I don't really do them. I do them with cables because it kind of evens out that resistance profile a little bit. But I don't love preacher curls with like an easy bar or anything like that on a proper easy curl bench.
Yeah, yeah. Even I don't do them that often, but when I do them with dumbbells, like unilaterally, I just keep a little bit of the ROM left
Yeah,
because I just feel like something's gonna happen.
for
Probably
sure.
like if I do this for a year straight, like in one day, something's gonna happen.
Yeah, you've seen way too many of those videos on YouTube of people's biceps tearing, man. They just show up in my feed all the time. I don't know why.
Yeah, the bicep tears and the chest tears from benching, and like
Yeah.
the classic leg press knees
Oh my
bending to
God.
the wrong side.
That one's the most cringy, dude.
Yeah, yeah, it's not good. I thought we could talk a little bit about. I mean, we talked a little bit about frequency and volume and stuff like that, but like, I don't know. What's your training like right now? Like you mentioned that already.
Yeah, I'm doing a push pull legs split right now, but I kind of changed it around to be a little bit more conducive to me. And basically, what I did is I took the leg day and split it in two. So I have a push day, a pull day, a hamstring day, and a quad day, and a rest day. And so it's basically 4 out of 5 training days. But what's beautiful about that split is that the 2 leg days, which usually if you had 1 leg day would be this massive daunting undertaking that consumes my brain and has anxiety for 24 hours before leg day. Instead, I do literally 5 sets of hamstrings on one day and 5 sets of quads on the next day. And I'm able to get that done in 45 minutes or so with warm up.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes leg day much less daunting. And I feel like I'm able to give a lot more to each individual leg day, hamstring and quad specific. So for me, like I think that's the future. I don't know if I'm ever in my entire life going to have a leg day per se again. So even if when I run this bro split starting in January, I'm likely going to split legs that way as well. So it's going to have 6 out of 7 training days with one muscle group on each. So anyway, that's my split right now is the push pull legs. I'm doing cardio as we kind of alluded to earlier. So I have rowing that I'm doing this off season. I have biking that I'll probably start up again in the spring, and mostly using the rowing as a way to stay conditioned for biking as I want to do another bike race or two this summer. And yeah, that's it. If you have any questions specific to the training or anything, like I'm glad to dig in further.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm a bit curious about the cardio, implementing that with the resistance training, and I guess you kind of have to bump up the calories quite a bit with the cardio, and like managing fatigue becomes a little bit more tricky. Um, so how have you kind of found that? Because you were doing bike racing, and it takes a lot of energy. So how did you kind of find that to work out?
Yeah, good question. It is very fatiguing. So I think in retrospect now it's easier for me to look back and realize how fatiguing it was. Whereas sometimes when you're in the moment, you have the adrenaline and the goal focused mindset where you don't allow yourself to believe that you're feeling fatigued. Um, so yeah, my weight plummeted. I started my bike race prep around 195, and by the time that I went to actually race, I was in the low 180s. I even hit a 180.6, which is the lowest I've ever seen in the last 9 years. Uh, and I was trying to eat as much food as I could, which is the wild part. Like I was eating desserts most nights. I was eating fatty cuts of meat. I was downing rice and potatoes and bread and bagels and pasta and pretty much whatever I could get my hands on. And I was full all the time. Like I didn't actually feel hungry. I was just eating food because I knew I needed it. And yet I kept losing weight. And that's the craziest thing to me, because the last 3 years I've done a proper diet without cardio, with steps, basically tracking steps and caloric deficit. And that was what I always assumed was the best way to lose weight and get the look that you want for a photo shoot. And I was hungry all the time. Like I literally was food focused by the midway through the diet. I was thinking about food all the time. I was struggling at night because I would want some sort of dessert after dinner that I couldn't have. Um, and I had like disrupted sleep toward the end and all the stuff. And then this time I just did a shit ton of cardio and ate as much food as I possibly could to the point that I was stuffed all the time and I still lost weight. And when I look at the actual results of what happened in the gym, I had mostly the same decreases in performance that I would have from cutting calories and walking. Like my chest movements and my quad movements, like my pressing quad movements, went down a little bit. Not so much in weight, but I'd lose like a rep here and there, maybe 5 pounds here and there, not a ton. And everything else didn't really fall, which was about the same as what happened the last few years when doing the cut the proper way. And so I know not everyone has the time to bike 8 to 11 hours a week as I was doing, which is an insane amount of time commitment on top of lifting weights. But it does kind of change my perspective a little bit on how I might go about dieting in the future, in that there does seem to be something about the cardio that it allows you to eat a ton of food and to mitigate a lot of the hunger. I don't know if there's like an appetite suppressive effect of cardio. I don't exactly understand why that is, because steps are cardio in a sense as well, but there's some sort of regulatory function that is changed when you're doing more intense cardio. And I don't exactly know what the mechanistic data would say about that, but I felt it. And so, yeah, that was basically how it went.
Yeah, I remember when I was doing some wrestling, I actually messed up my shoulder a bit, so I took a break. But I'm gonna delve into jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and stuff like that a bit. And I was kind of wondering your opinion, like, because when you're really diligent about tracking your macros down to the calorie, getting your sessions in, you don't want to mess it up by adding a ton of random stuff, and it's hard to really know like how much energy am I burning and how much am I getting in. Because I felt like after those wrestling sessions, I was like, I'm dead. I want to sleep, and I feel like eating at least 1,000 extra calories today because it was so fatiguing, you know.
Yeah, I think you can pretty much confidently add 500 to 1,000 calories probably most days. I mean, if you're wrestling for an hour, if you think about what the caloric burn is of walking for an hour, you're going to get approximately 600 calories of burn from walking for an hour. If you're wrestling for an hour, I would guess that's 1,000, 1,200, something like that. Obviously there's breaks in there and stuff like that as well. But, you know, the answer is probably to auto-regulate your appetite based off of what you're feeling and keep the food as quality as you can, of course. But I think if you auto-regulate based on appetite, I think you'll find that it's probably pretty solid and you'll get within the ballpark of where you want to be.
Yeah. So maybe just adding extra calories on those wrestling days, for example, and just seeing what happens regulating from there.
Exactly. Yeah. Like if you wrestle 3 times a week, maybe it's 1,000 calories each time. And so you get a 3,000 caloric surplus for the week. And then over a number of weeks, you get a trend and see what's happening.
I guess you had maybe the same, but like getting that mindset shift, because when we're used to doing like just lifting, eating, we want to keep making progress. I want to kind of delve into those things, but I'm afraid to stagnate and not get any gains really, and like have to figure everything out as a whole. It's like, I don't know, was that hard for you to make that shift? Or like, I guess you thought about it for a few weeks, like wondering like, do I want to do this? Or do I just want to keep doing what I'm doing? Because it's always hard to change lanes and do something new.
You mean as far as the bike race and the food and the stuff?
Yeah, like should I keep doing lifting or should I just really focus on this cardio thing right now and just be fine with maybe being stuck or figuring things out?
Yeah, no, good question. Because I tried to do both full force for too long. I think it wasn't until 7 weeks out from the bike race that I finally succumbed, and I was like, "Fuck, I can't keep training bodybuilding 5 days a week with the amount of volume that I'm doing and expect to also be able to do 8 to 11 hours of biking a week. That's insane." And so I switched essentially. At that point, I had to have that mindset shift of, okay, I am putting my bodybuilding goals on hold. They are going on the shelf. And now cardio is the primary focus from here forward. And in doing so, I actually started getting a lot better results at cardio quickly, which was really cool because trying to fight both battles, I was just fatigued and not winning either one. So once I made the decision, then it was really easy. I was just like, okay, I'm going to go back to full body training. I'm going to do this twice a week now instead of 3 times, which would be a normal dose of training. And I'm probably only going to do legs on one of the 2 days because having legs that are tired are not conducive to good quality bike races or bike events. And so, yeah, 7 weeks out, I made that change and biking improved, which was awesome and validating. And I actually didn't lose a ton on the weights either. I think cutting the weights back actually helped me maintain my weights, whereas continuing to try to push into higher volumes and intensities than I should have been would have probably caused me to overtrain and eventually start moving backwards. So I do think it's important to kind of segregate your goals into these buckets and have one that is the priority and make decisions that support the one that is your priority, and then kind of put the other one up on a shelf and say, I'll come back to you later.
Because wanting to do 10 different things and then not deciding for one is like a lot of beginners when they want to gain or shred or like, what should I do first? Can I do both at the same time? Like, it's usually best to focus on one thing at a time and just do it proper, and then for a while and then move on to another thing maybe, instead of trying to juggle multiple things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can still do both. Like right now, lifting's my priority, but I'm still doing cardio, and cardio was my priority and I was still doing lifting. But yeah, you'd certainly have to decide which one is the priority.
Mm-hmm. So maybe when implementing intense cardio, like just dropping the volume to like, sometimes my English just
maintenance
goes.
level. Yeah. Maintenance volume.
Yeah, and just like seeing, is that working? Maybe you can add a little bit, but like if it's too much, then it's gonna crash like into the cardio and vice versa. Like,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I agree.
so now you just have a low amount of cardio just on maintenance for the cardio per se, or
That's actually a good question because I have this guy who's coaching me now, Mike Nelson. He's a PhD, and he offered to coach me basically for free for my cardio as a case study sort of thing, because I went on his podcast and we ended up talking about a poor VO2 max test that I had. And so our whole thing was, let's figure out a way to improve your VO2 max. Well, the thing about improving VO2 max is that it requires you to actually work on your cardio. Doing zone 2 or going out and doing just like base training for health, that is easy. And you can do that on maintenance volume or whatever, but to actually push the goal of trying to improve your performance at cardio requires you to do some intensity, and for it to be more than just maintenance volume, or else you don't make improvements. So his challenge is for him to figure out a way to get me enough rowing volume with enough intensity in a manner that doesn't conflict with my weight training objectives. And so what we found, at least in the first 2 to 3 weeks of working together, is that 3 times a week rowing seems to be the right dose. There's RPE with the rowing. So it's like today I did a 2K row, which is 7 to 8 minutes. So I did that at an RPE 8, which was hard. I mean, an RPE 8 is certainly not easy. It's for 7 to 8 minutes. But it's only 7 to 8 minutes. So it's not the end of the world. And then I have another day that has me doing a 20-minute row, but it's at an RPE 7. So again, not easy. It's still hard. It's still 20 minutes of movement, but the third day is some intervals that again are hard, but it's a total of 15 or 20 minutes of rowing. So across the whole week, I'm doing about an hour of rowing. And when I was biking, I was doing 8 to 11 hours across the week. So it's literally this minuscule dose. It's just that it's a little bit more intense and a little bit less enduring than what I was doing with the biking.
yeah. Has your like mindset shifted now? So are you like done with lifting? No, but like, what do you kind of find harder, to be honest? Like, do you find cardio to be a different beast?
I still find rowing to be really, really hard, man.
Mm.
Um, I'm a decent rower, all things considered, but it is just unforgiving. It's very, very hard. And I I enjoy biking. I find it challenging as well, but in a different way, and I enjoy it. I think it might be just being outside, to be honest. I bet if I could row on the open water in nature, that I would like rowing much more and probably not find it quite as daunting to do. But I really enjoy getting out on the bike and like seeing the beauty around me and the sunlight and the outdoors. I mean, it's incredible. It's something I look forward to. I don't look forward to the rowing sessions at all, and I do look forward to lifting. That's cool because when I was preparing for the bike race, I kind of lost the love of lifting. Like it was, I just wanted to be biking because that was what my goal was, and I was just lifting because I knew I was supposed to lift. And now I'm back to having the love for lifting. And so even 2 days ago, I had a hack squat session, and instead of it's a 1 RIR and then it was a 1 to 2 and then a 0 to 1. And usually I would have anxiety going into that session and be like, oh my God, like I can't believe I'm supposed to use more weight than I did last week. Last week was so hard, you know? And this week, being well fed, sleeping well, not having the burden of the cardio on me, I was legit excited for that hack squat session. I was like, I'm gonna smash this. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna beat last week. And I was excited about it. And so it's a very cool shift in mindset from where I was like 2 months prior.
Yeah. I mean, it goes up and down, you know, like sometimes you're on a 1 year streak of lifting with consistency, you feel great. And then I think these last 2 years, I've just been kind of maintaining plus because I've just been like, I don't know, you know, not as stoked about it as I was, but then I kind of feel like I'm getting stoked again now. And it kind of fluctuates a little bit throughout my life or my training career.
Yeah. How long have you been training for?
I think I started like 2016. No, not 2016,
Okay.
like 2000 and I was 16. So in like 2012, I think.
Oh,
So
cool.
it's been like 10 years.
Yeah.
A lot of wasted years when I know what I know now. It would be cool if we kind of knew what we know now back in the day.
Yeah.
Just seeing the
Yeah.
new gains with like the approach we have now.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. How's your body feel overall? Are all your joints and everything good?
Everything's good. Feeling great actually, except
Cool.
this COVID thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
yeah, I think periods of time I've just been too focused on staying lean, of course, and that's hindered a lot of progress. And maybe not having the most specific exercise selection for each muscle group and pushing reps in reserve hard enough. Like think those two things have been some of the things that's hindered my progress a lot over these 10 years. So I guess when a lot of people have been training for a long time, people say, yeah, you'll get less and less gains. But I think when a lot of people start focusing on quality over quantity and just having everything set up neatly and having great sleep and great, like, a calorie surplus for an extended period of time, they notice that shit, I still have gains to make. Like, if
Yeah.
I optimize things, there's still a lot to gain here.
Yeah, for sure. Would you consider yourself like a late intermediate or early advanced?
I would just consider myself like intermediate or early
Okay.
intermediate at best because it's been so
Okay.
many shitty periods of time. But
Yeah.
it's like I have an interest in hypertrophy and I love it, and I'm interested in it and everything about it. So it's just like I'll probably lift for the rest of my life, even though maybe my genetics aren't the best or whatever. But I just like it. I love it.
Cool. That's awesome. No, I mean, I'm sure if you're intermediate, man, you have plenty of gains left to make. So, I mean, I just put up a sequence on my Instagram of, my progression throughout the years. And there was a point at 9 years in where I looked pretty damn good. Like a couple of people even commented and were like, wow, that's like a legit physique. And then you scroll to the next one and it's me like 14 years after that or something like that. And it's like, oh, that's way different than that, but that was already good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for sure. I mean, once you really dial it in, there's plenty of progress to be made throughout those years.
Yeah, and there seems to be a lot of people on Instagram, for example, that just have really good lat gains or something for the last few years after they started implementing more specific exercise selection and more consistency and stuff like that. I think I saw a photo of you as well. Like you were like, this was me a few years ago, and now I trained for
Yep.
3 years after that, and I look much better. So that's cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I credit a lot of that to the Coach Kassem N1 education type way of doing things for back work. I would say, if anything from their work has really hit home with me the most, it is the back training and the lat training, and that's been a huge game changer for sure.
hmm I think Menno's course and his info has been a great influence on me, but also it kind of made me into this like compounds, just do basic. It doesn't really matter if you feel the muscle, but then you do something like a iliac lat pull down and you're like, this is kind of hitting my lats in a different way. I think it's doing something.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
hmm do you have any advice for like intermediate lifters who are kind of stuck in the same patterns and just kind of feel like they're not making gains, or like what did you kind of tell them to focus on?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is that you need to standardize form,
hmm
because I was stuck in that kind of intermediate circle that just felt like I was, yeah, going in circles, not really accomplishing much. And
hmm
it wasn't until I really standardized reps that I was able to assess whether I was in fact progressing. Because before, when I was an intermediate, what would happen was I would start a cycle and my form would be perfect, but I'd go to failure. And then because I went to failure in the first week, every week after that, I would have to compromise form just a little bit more, but I would always improve. I would get another rep and then another rep and then another rep. And then I'd add some weight and I'd go back down and I'd work back up. And if you look at what the actual movement looked like from week 1 to week 7 or whatever, it was like my incline bench presses went from touching my chest and up to going like to here and up. So I'm losing like 3 inches of range of motion. I'm tilting my body to the side to try to get like the final rep. And once you start standardizing things, then you actually can honestly assess whether things are in fact not working, because that's the intermediate plight is to say that it's not working, but you can't say that until you're sure that it's not working. And if it's not working, then I guess the question is what next. And what I always did was I would change between two different types of training, two different rep schemes that worked for me. I had like low rep scheme where I would just do 4 to 6 reps of pretty much everything. It was a max OT training plan from the early 2000s, and 4 to 6 reps of everything to failure. And that worked magic for me. It was great. And then when I would get tired of that or it would stall out, I would go to a higher rep scheme where it would go like 15, 12, 10, 8, or something along those lines. So I was staying more in the 8 to 15 rep range. And then I would make some progress there for a little bit. And then that would stall out and I'd drop back down and do the 4 to 6s for a while and go back to the max OT training plan. And so switching between having low rep ranges to focus on and higher rep ranges to focus on keeps things fresh, but it also ensures thorough training of your body, and it allows you to grab adaptations, because if you've conditioned yourself to be good at 4 to 6 reps, then you're actually going to be able to get some adaptations just because it's new when you go up to like the 10 to 15 rep range. So I do like that idea of kind of oscillating between different rep ranges as a potential solution for intermediates, standardizing form for sure. And then it goes without saying, I think, but eating enough food. I mean, if you're not progressing, up the food and it likely will help you progress more. And yeah, you'll have to take some body fat off later on, but there's a reason that almost every guy that has a bunch of muscle has at some point gotten kind of big.
Yeah, it's faster to lose fat than to gain size. So just keeping
Yep.
that in mind and not being too hesitant to just gain a little bit of weight and stick it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, and it's better when you're an intermediate. Like when you're an advanced guy doing that, you could gain all that weight just for 1 pound of muscle or something. And you have to
hmm
go through that big up and then that big down. And it's like there's not a reward at the end, really. But when
hmm
you're an intermediate and you do that, I mean, there's so much to gain there.
Yeah. You talked about like the different rep ranges, and I think you guys talked about this as well. And it kind of, I thought about it as well when I saw Paul Carter doing like 6 to 8 or 5 to 7 reps for everything, and it's like lateral raises with cables
Yeah.
for 7 reps. It's like it feels like it's too heavy to get the form really smooth, like because you're just immediately on those slow reps.
With cables, I actually find it to be totally fine. I use the 6 to 8 rep range for cable laterals as well.
Mm-hmm.
With dumbbells, yeah, it's crazy. So if you can find a more even resistance profile, or if you can turn a movement into be a little bit more lengthened, like when we do those lateral raises behind the back with at wrist height, it
Mm-hmm.
really is a much more lengthened overload. And so that lateral raise is going to act more like a squat or an RDL or something like that. And so thus, because that resistance profile is very similar to those other lengthened movements, you can, I think, more productively work in those lower rep ranges. Whereas something like a dumbbell lateral raise, yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot to be gained in that 5 to 7 rep range there.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like your delts have improved over the years when integrating those things? Because a lot of people, I think, they just do standing dumbbell lateral raises only for their side delts pretty much for years. And then, like we talked about earlier with the shortened and lengthened stuff, like you just
Yeah.
have more to give. Like doing a lying dumbbell lateral raise after, for example, or a wrist height cable or something after standing dumbbell. Like
Yeah.
it feels great.
Yeah. I agree. I love the short lengthened overload piece as well. So I use the dumbbell lateral raise into the dual cable lateral raise for sure. As far as whether my delts have improved, I wouldn't say that was even something I was trying to improve. And if you look at that picture of my back that you mentioned, where it's like 3 years difference between the two back shots where I got the back double bicep, you can actually see significant increase in lateral and front delt heads as well in that flexing shot. And so, yeah, I mean, unintentionally, just by kind of changing up the profile by which I was doing my lateral raises, it seemed like they grew as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Cool, man.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much all the questions I had. It's just so much to talk about, but some questions will just create a cascade of 3 hours of talking. But yeah, awesome stuff, man.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah,
If you ever want to do this again, man, hit me up. Glad to come back.
that would be awesome, man. I'm just wanting to have a ton of awesome guests on. I guess for every episode, there's going to be a guest on.
Cool.
And then hopefully you'll hop on in the future and we'll talk about some different cool stuff.
Yeah, man, for sure.
Sweet. How do you want to end this one? Do you have a joke or something?
No joke.
No
You guys
jokes.
can find me at Bryan Boorstein on Instagram, and I have a podcast as well, Eat Train Prosper. So check me out. Yeah.
Check out Bryan. He has lots of great info. If you want to learn great exercises per muscle group, great ways to do things, and see someone who's living the life that he's preaching, check Bryan out. And looking forward to the next episode of you guys' podcast. So check that out as well. Because that's how I kind of, maybe that's not how I got to know about you, but that's definitely like how I don't know, like got to want to contact you. So
Cool. Well, I'm glad that we were able to connect.
yeah. All right, man. Thanks for
All right.
hopping on.